Welcome, brave listeners, to Wilhelm Presents Frightening Tales. I'm your host, Wilhelm. Tune in each week where I entertain my listeners with another dark and creepy tale of the paranormal, donated by authors from all over this world. If you're an author of some paranormal fiction and would like to share a story with my listeners, submit one at frighteningtales.com. And while you're there, tune in for more than 100 episodes of previous content. I would like to take a moment and thank the more than 400 listeners who've subscribed to the YouTube experience of my frightening tales. For joining us on this journey, please spread the word. Frightening Tales is primarily organic in its distribution, relying on word-of-mouth advertising from all of you. I couldn't sell the channel better than you can, so find other lovers of the things that go bump in the night, and please let them know. Today's episode is written by Dillon Hendrick, a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. There's a mouthful. Living in southern Texas with his beautiful wife and 2 kids. Look for his short story coming out soon in a collection known as Trash Tales. He is currently chipping away at a new short story that he hopes to be finished with later this year. But for now, here's his tale, Ice Cream in the Woods. He hasn't said a word since he's gotten here. What do you think? Should we good cop, bad cop him? He's 13, Mitch. He's not talking because he's scared out of his mind. I mean, look at the poor kid. Officers Charles and Mitch turned their heads into the small, office-turned-interrogation room. Sitting at a wooden table on a foldable metal chair was Tony. His skin, littered with cuts and gouges as if someone had tried to kill him with 1,000,000 paper cuts, glowed a sickly yellow under the room's single bare light bulb. His dark brown eyes, resting within the deep cavities of his sleep-deprived eye sockets, stared blankly at the wall. His expression was flat and void of emotion. His 2 best friends suddenly disappear, he sleeps in a jail cell, and now he's here being interrogated by cops? How would you feel in his situation? Officer Charles asked. He was there when they disappeared. He's gotta know something. Look, just let me talk to him, Charles said. I've always been better at talking to kids. What the fuck does that mean? You've got this whole big scary lumberjack thing going. It freaks the kids out. The ladies never complain, Mitch said, before spitting a wad of chewing tobacco into the cup he was holding. Charles opened the door and walked into the small room. Good morning, Tony. My name's Officer Charles. Tony jumped at the sound of Charles's voice. His eyes darted toward him and quickly back to the wall. Sorry to scare you, Charles said, as he slid into the chair across from Tony. I'm sure the last couple of hours have been pretty rough for you. Hopefully we can get you home soon so you can get cleaned up and get some much-needed sleep. Tony continued to stare, unblinking at the wall. Okay. I'll make this quick so you can get out of here. How does that sound? Tony didn't respond. The yellow light bulb flickered overhead. Tony, do you know what happened to Ethan and Miguel? Charles made sure to keep his voice gentle and non-accusatory. Tony shifted in his seat but remained silent. I know that they're your best friends, Tony said, cutting Charles off. His eyes remained locked on the cement wall, but his expression had changed. His jaw was clenched and he looked like he was holding back tears. Best friends, Charles stated. He paused, making sure to choose his words carefully. I need to know what happened to your friends, Tony. Their parents are going to be worried, sick, and, well, you're the only lead I've got. It won't make a difference, Tony whispered. A chill ran down Charles's spine. So, the kid did know something, and that something didn't sound good. Leaning forward, resting his arms on the table, he asked, why won't it make a difference? Tony fidgeted with his hands and remained silent for what felt like minutes. But Charles remained quiet, not wanting to press Tony any more than he already had. Finally, in a nearly inaudible whisper, Tony said, you won't believe me. Try me. Tony looked up at Charles and met his eyes for the first time. Do I have to do this? No, you don't have to. Not now. But the longer you wait to talk, the worse things will get. I've been in your shoes, Tony, and I promise you, the longer you hold on to the nasty shit in life, well, the more rotten it gets. Tony nodded, and he began to recount the most unbelievable story Charles had ever heard. A crow let out an irritated caw as the three boys rushed past. Last one at the pond has to shove a pine cone up their ass, Miguel shouted over his shoulder. I bet you'd love to see that, Tony shouted back. Pine trees of every variety towered over the boys, culminating into a dark green blur as they sprinted by. Beams of sunlight trickled through the foliage, casting flickers of light onto the boy's skin. Yellow, red, and white wildflowers lashed out at their shins in retaliation for being trampled. The pond, lined with cattails and moss-covered boulders, came into view as the boys reached the hill's summit. There Miguel's words cut off into a grunt as a stray root grabbed his foot, sending him soaring through the air. Have fun with that pine cone, Ethan shouted as he and Tony lunged over Miguel, who was scrambling to pick himself up. The boys tore off their shirts and kicked off their shoes without slowing their descent towards the pond. Wood frogs leapt out of the boys' path as they thrust themselves into the pond, grasping at the water's cold embrace. Hours drained by in what felt like minutes as the boys caught frogs, threw mud at each other, slapped each other with lily pads and cattails, and made the most of what little summer they had left. That's it, boys. 8th grade. The year that Jasmine Flask falls madly in love with me, and I officially exit the Virgin Club. Sayonara, bitches, Miguel said as he skipped rocks over the surface of the pond. The sun had begun its slow descent, filling the sky with an array of red, orange, and purple hues that melted together like a tub of sherbet. The shadows of the pine trees grew long, covering the pond and blocking out the sun's warmth. She doesn't even know you exist, Ethan said, giving Tony a smirk. Jasmine was the goddess of Swell Rock Middle School, the type of girl who wouldn't offer boys like Tony, Ethan, and Miguel a second glance. She will, though, Miguel shot back. But don't worry. I'll still secretly hang out with you guys when I'm not too busy with the popular kids. Tony rolled his eyes. You aren't going to be here for high school, so why does it even matter? Tony instantly regretted his choice of words. Miguel's dad had recently gotten a job in Texas. This would be his last year in Swell Rock, Maine, and it was a topic that he avoided, like it was the bubonic plague. The silence loomed over them like a thick fog, stifling the carefree atmosphere that usually enveloped the boys. Miguel studied the rock he was holding, his jaw clenching and unclenching repeatedly. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. Guys, it's getting pretty cold. Should we head back? Aw, is someone getting a little chilly? Miguel said mockingly, clearly relieved by the change of topic. Shut up, your lips are blue, Miguel. With that, the boys climbed onto the muddy bank of the pond to air dry. You guys want to spend the night at my house? Ethan asked. Is your mom going to be there? Miguel asked, winking at Tony. You're fucking gross, bro, Ethan said. But seriously, my house or what? I want to check out the new D&D campaign. I'll have to double check with my mom, Tony said, knowing that his comment would earn him a sarcastic remark from Miguel. Just as Miguel opened his mouth, a familiar jingle poured through the woods. What the hell? Ethan said. An ice cream truck? There's no way. There aren't any neighborhoods for miles, said Tony. I could go for some ice cream. You guys got any cash? Miguel asked, standing up and looking in the direction of the music. It's cold as hell out here, Miguel. What's wrong with you? Ethan looked over at Tony with a bewildered expression. Tony shrugged. Miguel's mind worked in mysterious ways. It's never too cold for cookies and cream, Miguel stated matter-of-factly. Tony sighed, shook his head, and got to his feet. I've got a $5. He took the folded $5 bill out of his pocket and waved it in the air. Badass. Let's go get some ice cream. The boys slipped on their shirts and shoes and followed the jingle through the dense foliage, leaving the beaten path to keep the sound in front of them. Tony did his best to keep his teeth from chattering, but the wind had picked up, and the little sunlight that was left was hiding behind the towering pines. He wouldn't have admitted it to the others, but the cold was not the only thing bothering him. A growing sense of dread had begun to blossom within him. Ethan let out a high-pitched squeal as a red squirrel darted out in front of him. Be careful, Ethan. I heard the squirrels around these parts are deadly, Miguel said, with a snicker. Tony smiled, relieved that he wasn't the only one feeling uneasy. The music grew louder as the boys continued their march through the woods. But there was another sound that continued to swell along with the tune of the ice cream truck. Do you guys hear that? Tony asked. It sounds like birds. As if on cue, a glob of white bird crap landed on Ethan's shoulder. Ah! Nasty! Ethan yelled. Tony looked up to see a flock of pigeons resting in a pine tree above them, their soft coos harmonizing with the jingle of the ice cream truck. A woodpecker began hammering a tree nearby, adding to the strange melody. The sun was now fully enveloped by the horizon, leaving the sky a deep purple, making it even harder for the boys to see where they were walking. But just as Tony was about to suggest that they turn around before they get completely lost, a yellow light trickled through the trees in front of them. As they drew closer, the light grew stronger, illuminating their path. The sounds of the birds, the peculiar light, and the song of the ice cream truck filled the woods with life. Holy shit, Tony whispered, as the trees abruptly gave way to a grassy circular clearing encompassed by pine trees on all sides. Drooping over the clearing like an enormous glowing spider web were dozens of overlapping strings of lights. Lining the strings in every direction were birds. So many birds. Blue jays, robins, cardinals, pigeons, woodpeckers, and many birds that Tony didn't recognize. All singing, chirping, and tweeting at once, creating a cacophony of noise. In the center of the clearing, covered in hundreds of birds itself, was the ice cream truck. A giant plastic ice cream cone filled with pink ice cream and littered with bird feces sat on top of a large white truck. Holes had been drilled into it, transforming it into a giant birdhouse. Multiple perches stuck out of the truck like growths, each crowded with a different bird species. The side of the truck was lined with paintings of different ice cream flavors and treats. The serving window was propped open, but Tony couldn't see anyone inside of it. In front of the truck were 4 wooden picnic tables, with red-white striped umbrellas jutting out of the center of them. Unsurprisingly, these were also cluttered with various feathered creatures. Despite the impossible number of birds, the air smelled chocolatey and sweet. A barred owl swooped within inches of Tony, causing him to snap out of his trance. The owl fluttered onto the sill of the service window and pecked a small metal bell tied to the top of the window. What the fuck is going on? Ethan asked. I don't know, man, but there better not be bird shit in my ice cream or I'm gonna be pissed, Miguel responded. Just as Tony opened his mouth to ask Miguel if he was seriously still going to get ice cream, a man appeared in the open window. A square white hat sat on top of his greasy brown hair that lay plastered to his skull. His nose, long and pointy like a beak, sat between 2 dark, beady eyes. A wide, toothy smile crept over his thin face, wrinkling every inch of visible skin. Skin that seemed to hang loosely off the man's skull. A black bow tie sat at the base of his scrawny neck, below an Adam's apple roughly the size of a golf ball, cinching together the top of his white button-down shirt. You boys want to try the best ice cream on the planet? The man asked. His voice was shrill and raspy, like that of a crow. Tony glanced at Ethan, relieved to find that he wore a similar look of confusion and apprehension. Maybe we should... Tony cut himself off, realizing that his words were falling on deaf ears, as Miguel started strolling towards the ice cream truck. What are you doing? Tony hissed. I'm getting some ice cream, Miguel shot coolly over his shoulder. Ethan gave Tony a shrug. Miguel seemed to lack the alarm that would be going off in most people's heads right about now. Nothing about this situation was normal in the least, but that did nothing to dissuade the boy from a scoop of cookies and cream ice cream, whether it was covered in bird shit or not. Tony sighed and ignored the alarms that were very much going off in his own head and started after Miguel. After all, Miguel was one of his best friends, stubborn or not, and he wasn't about to let him get kidnapped by some weird-ass bird man. A murder of crows fluttered out of the way as Miguel carelessly slogged through them. What can I get you, young man? The ice cream man squawked as Miguel approached the window. Do you have... Miguel jumped back, seemingly startled by something in the ice cream truck. Tony cautiously approached the truck with Ethan right behind him. Standing to the right of the strange man with an ice cream scoop clamped in its enormous beak was an insidious-looking bird that appeared to be about 4 feet tall. It glared at them with its large, almost human-like eyes underneath its gray plumage. Its long legs and knobby knees betrayed its menacing appearance. "Oh!" the ice cream man exclaimed, his smile growing even larger, displaying his dark, yellow teeth. "No need to be alarmed, boys. This is Harold. He's a shoebill stork and a wonderful assistant." As if on cue, the shoebill dipped down into the ice cream display, coming back up with a scoop of cookies and cream ice cream. He gently set the scoop of ice cream onto a waffle cone sitting in a rack. The ice cream man gently lifted the cone out of the rack with a long, spindly hand dressed in a white glove. "How'd you know I was gonna order that?" Miguel asked, sounding unsure for the first time. "Well, little birdie told me," he replied with a wink. Tony's alarm began to ring louder. "Okay, thank you, sir. How much will that be? We should really be going." "You don't want anything, bro?" Miguel's apprehension seemed to have dissipated as quickly as it had come. Tony stared at him dumbfounded. "No, Miguel, I don't want anything," he said, through gritted teeth with a stare that was meant to pierce Miguel's soul. But he did not seem to notice. "All right, suit yourself. Want anything, Ethan?" Miguel asked. No, I'm okay." Tony's right. It's getting late. My parents are gonna be worried sick." "How about this?" the ice cream man said, never breaking from his toothy smile. "This one's on the house. After all, this is your first time having the best ice cream in the world. And I couldn't live with the guilt of knowing that you missed out on it." Ethan twisted his hands together and stared down at his feet. "Oh, okay, I'll get a..." His voice trailed off as a duck with a glistening emerald head waddled between his legs in search of bugs. "You don't have to get anything, Ethan," Tony said, becoming wearier with each passing moment. "Holy crap! This is amazing!" Miguel said, before heading in for another lick of his ice cream. "Maybe just one scoop," Ethan muttered, eyeing Miguel as he rapidly devoured his ice cream. "Do you have mint chocolate chip?" "Of course we do," the ice cream man gleamed. The shoebill dipped his head into the ice cream display and came up with a scoop of pastel green ice cream, peppered with chocolate chips. "Nasty," Miguel said, giving the scoop of mint chocolate chip ice cream a disdainful glare. Ethan grabbed the ice cream cone and muttered, "Thank you." "Perhaps a sample would convince you, young man," the ice cream man pried. His unblinking, beady eyes held Tony in place. He extended his exceptionally long arm out towards Tony. A small yellow spoon topped with chocolate ice cream was pinched between two of his gloved fingers. "Well, maybe just a bite," Tony thought. But just as he plucked the spoon from the ice cream man's hand, Miguel let out a loud moan and doubled over with his arms wrapped tightly around his abdomen. "My stomach," he groaned. "Maybe if you hadn't eaten it like you were a starving animal, your stomach wouldn't hurt," Ethan scolded, taking a lick of his own ice cream. Tony wasn't convinced. He dropped his sample spoon onto the ground. "We need to head home now." "Oops, you dropped your sample. I'll get you another one," the ice cream man said, with a shrill laugh that sent a chill down Tony's spine. "No, I don't wanna." "What is that?" Ethan screamed. Tony followed Ethan's wide-eyed stare to Miguel, who was now huddled into the fetal position on the ground. His moans had turned into desperate whimpers. Confusion and terror took hold of Tony as he realized what Ethan was screaming at. Large pimple-like bumps had sprung up on Miguel's arms and the back of his neck. The bumps writhed frantically as if something was trying to escape from within. And just as this thought crossed Tony's mind, something did escape from one of the papules. At first, Tony thought it was a black spine of some sort, but as more began erupting from Miguel's skin, he realized what they were. "Feathers," he whispered, his eyes glued to the horrific scene unfolding before him. "What?" Ethan squeaked, taking a step back but never looking away from Miguel. "Feathers? He's growing feathers!" Miguel's whimpers turned to screams. "Guys, what's happening? Please help me, please!" Fighting every urge to turn and run, Tony bent down to help Miguel. He stopped inches from Miguel as cracking sounds began to emanate from within him. His screams became louder. His left arm jolted in an unnatural direction, and with it came another hideous crack. "His bones are breaking," Tony realized as tears formed in his eyes. Miguel's neck snapped up. He stared wide-eyed and desperate at Tony and Ethan. He opened his mouth as if he was going to scream, but what came out sounded more like the squawk of a parrot. His lips began to rip, sending small streams of blood down his chin. As the skin parted, an orange beak pushed its way to the surface. His blue eyes began to darken and shrink into a skull. "Tony!" Ethan's shout broke Tony from his trance. The cacophony of birds had formed a tight circle around the boys. Their songs and calls had fallen silent as they fluttered to the pine needle-covered ground. "Young man," the ice cream man called, "please try the ice cream. It truly is the best in the world." His smile had faded. His long lips stretched into a scowl as he reached even further out of the ice cream truck window to hand Tony another sample of ice cream. "We need to get the hell out of here, Ethan." But Miguel!" His words faded to a gasp as he laid eyes on Miguel, or rather the creature who had been Miguel only moments ago. A green parrot with red neck plumage lay on its side, covered in blood and other unknown fluids, breathing heavily and squawking softly. "Take a bite!" Tony smacked the spoon out of the ice cream man's hand before he could finish his sentence. "Run!" Tony screamed. Tony and Ethan broke into a sprint directly into the mass of birds. Screeches of protest emanated from many of the birds as the boys ran through them. Feathers of all colors flew in every direction, Blue jays, martins, cardinals, and many small birds that Tony couldn't identify dove from the streams of lights, pecking frantically at the boys. Larger birds ran by their legs, pecking and flapping their wings. Ethan screamed in agony. Tony glanced in his direction, expecting to see an eagle attempting to claw out of his eyes, but what he actually saw was much worse. Bumps were protruding from Ethan's face and arms. He scratched at them desperately as he ran. A large crow planted itself in front of Ethan. Tony yelled to warn him, but it was too late. Ethan went sprawling to the floor, and the mass of birds swarmed him like vultures to a carcass. Tony turned on a dime and made a run for Ethan. The ice cream man's skeletal hand shot through the bird cluster and grabbed Tony's arm. With an unexpected strength, he pulled Tony within inches of himself. His beady eyes burned with rage, his breath reeking of rotten fruit infiltrated Tony's nostrils as he spoke. "Eat your fucking ice cream." His other hand, holding a cone full of what looked to be chocolate ice cream, came swinging towards Tony. Tony froze. The awful realization that he would soon be joining his friends ensnared his mind. A white blur slammed into the ice cream man just as he was about to shove the ice cream into Tony's mouth. His grip released from Tony's arm, but he couldn't move. He stood numb with fear and sadness, watching as Ethan wrestled to keep the ice cream man pinned down. His arms and legs were covered in white feathers, and his face, typically peppered with freckles, was now more barn owl than human. He glanced back at Tony, and though no words came out of his mouth, his eyes told Tony all he needed to know. Run. Tears and sweat poured down Tony's cheeks as he turned to run. He pushed through the tsunami of birds, not feeling the pain as they pecked and clawed relentlessly at his exposed skin. At some point, he must have broken out of the chaos, but time seemed to have lost all sense of meaning as Tony continued to run as fast as his exhausted legs could carry him. He reached the edge of the forest, but there was no way he was taking any chances. He kept running. He passed Swell Rock Middle School. It sneered at him under the moonlight, mocking his empty dreams of having the year of his life with his two best friends. He passed Glitch Arcade, where the trio used to spend nearly every Friday after school, sinking countless hours into Mortal Kombat and X-Men. He passed his street and considered going home, throwing himself into his parents' arms and never leaving the house again. But he knew that wasn't the right thing to do. He kept running, drenched in sweat, despite the chill of the night, until he reached the Swell Rock Police Department. Early morning sun hid behind the rows of pine trees, casting long shadows along the forest floor. Dew jumped from knee-high grass and clung to Officer Charles's uniform, plastering the black polyester to his shins. He slapped at a mosquito who buzzed away sluggishly, plump with his blood. "Fucking mosquitoes," he muttered. "Are you sure we're headed in the right direction?" Mitch asked, panting. His uniform, drenched in sweat, clung to his large beer belly. Charles glanced down at the map of Swell Rock Forest. An orange crayon-drawn circle indicated the location of the pond, where Tony and his friends had been hanging out. A crude line ran from the pond to where Tony believed he and his friends had encountered the so-called ice cream man. Despite multiple promptings, Tony had refused to come with the officers. He had seemed shocked that they would even suggest it. After having Tony show them where he believed the strange events had occurred, Charles had the boy picked up by an ambulance and taken to the nearest ER to have his wounds treated. They had found the pond just as Tony had described, littered with cattails and lily pads. The mud displayed the boy's footprints, souvenirs of what may have been the boy's last moments of happiness. They followed the footprints until they disappeared into the layers of pine needles and continued in that direction, hoping it was a straight shot to the clearing Tony had described. The boy's story, although obviously unbelievable and strange, had unraveled an unease within Charles that he hadn't felt since childhood. A crow squawked from its perch in a nearby pine tree. Charles jumped and his hand darted to the gun holstered to his hip. Mitch let out a bellow of laughter and slapped Charles on the back. "Scared the ice cream man's gonna come and turn you into a peacock?" Charles felt a pool of relief spread through him. Just a damn bird. "I'm glad you think this is all a joke," Charles shot, glaring at Mitch. "It's a load of bullshit. The kid's trying to cover something up with that weird-ass story," Mitch said as he squeezed a wad of chewing tobacco with his sweaty fingers and tucked it behind his lip. He seemed traumatized, like whatever he saw messed him up pretty bad. Charles could feel his temples begin to throb with frustration. He wasn't sure why. He knew the absurdity of the story, and Mitch had every right to question it, but Tony definitely didn't seem like he was lying, as he described his friends turning into birds between snot-ridden sobs. "I think he fucked up, and his story was some kind of last-ditch effort to push the blame elsewhere. Maybe they were trying to break into Pete Slider's yard and got themselves shot." Mitch paused and spat a black glob of tobacco onto a pine cone. "Slider has always had a bit of a trigger finger, especially if he thought some teenagers were trying to steal from him." "These are kids' lives, Mitch. It's not a fucking game." Charles could see the clearing materialize through the pines. He picked up the pace, happy to avoid Mitch's next moronic response. As he approached the clearing, it became clear that it was just that, a clearing. There were no birds, no string lights interweaving into some sadistic spider web, and sure as hell no ice cream truck. It was just a grass-covered clearing lined with pine trees on every side. "Damn, I could have gone for a chocolate cone right about now." Mitch let out a thunderous laugh at his own shitty joke. Charles ignored him and said, "I'm going to take a look around." As the minutes passed, Charles began to lose hope that they would find anything at all. The clearing was the epitome of clear. There wasn't a blade of grass out of place. Just as he was about to concede defeat and suggest they look further into the woods, a flash of white caught his eye at the edge of the clearing. Halfway up a nearby pine tree sat a barn owl, staring down at him with an inquisitive tilt of its head. The beauty of the creature transfixed Charles, its white plumage radiating from within the foliage like a priceless jewel gleaming from the depth of a dark lake. He felt his heart begin to race as Tony's story came storming to the front of his mind. It can't be. "Yeah, you find something?" "Shit." Charles jumped. His eyes tore away from the owl. "Don't sneak up on me, Mitch." His heart pounding in his ears. "I wasn't sneaking up on you, Charlie. I called over here 3 times, but you didn't say nothing. You were just staring up at that tree with this terrified look on your face. Figured you found a body or something." Charles sighed, frustrated with himself for being so jumpy. No body, just a barn." The word caught in his throat as he looked up and realized that the owl was gone. There was His words trailed off. There was something on the branch where the owl had been perched. Without a second thought, he began making his way up the large pine tree, hoisting himself up branch by branch, a maneuver he hadn't performed since he was a teenager. "The hell you doing now, man?" Mitch asked, sounding a bit exacerbated. Charles ignored him and continued up the tree until he reached the branch the barn owl had been perched on. He stared down at the pale green substance seeping between the creases of the bark. "It's just owl shit, Charles, just some nasty owl shit," Charles thought. But deep down he knew no owl shit on earth looked like that. He felt numb. He could see his fingers mindlessly drift towards the sticky substance, dip into it and pull back towards his nose, confirming his fear. It was mint.
Thank you, brave listeners, for joining me today. Please join me again next week for another frightening tale, or listen to one of more than 100 previous episodes. If you enjoyed your time here, please support my work. If you've been watching on YouTube, like the episode and subscribe to the channel. If you've been tuned in on Apple Podcast, please rate the channel as you see fit. And if you've been listening to the program on Spotify, I'd love to hear your comments. Most of all, share frightening tales with those around you and support today's authors however you can. Until next time, when I share with you another frightening tale, listen if you're brave enough.